Hi, I'm Aaron from Classic Vacuum, and today we're doing a video on how to maintain some Riccar brush rollers. So we're going to cover 4 brush rolls. All 4 brush rolls take the same brush strips and they only have slight difference. The part numbers will be in the description as well as the links to all the items I'm talking about today. So you basically have the brush roll with no clutch and a flat belt. You have a brush roll with a clutch. The clutch is this mechanism here that engages and disengages the pulley. There's a version with the lifetime belt and no clutch. And then missing here today is the version with the clutch, but the pulley will be the lifetime pulley. The main thing you're going to want to look at when you're looking at your brush roll is the brush strips. Things that go wrong: they will get shorter, they will lose their crisp edge, or they can, I've seen it where some of them break off and they get thin, not short. So this is going to be how to change these brush strips as well as other items you want to look at. The great thing about these brush rolls is I can replace every part on them. You don't have to buy a new brush, though you can. Another thing you want to look at before we take this one apart is spin it with your finger. Does it spin free? You can see there's not a lot of resistance here. You want to make sure to clean any hair that's gotten in here and inspect the bearings. They should be quiet, and it should also have pretty good balance. So I'll set it up on the table like this, give it a faster spin, and you can see this one has pretty good balance. If it's super wobbly, you may have damaged this core for the brush holder section. So I like to lay out my parts in order so I don't forget what goes where. The first thing you want to do is take off your rubber end caps. There's a couple different designs, but most of these have a cotter pin on the edge. What I like to do is I like to put a little down pressure on the edge to take the pressure off that cotter pin. I just take a flathead screwdriver and I pop it off. On this particular type, under that cap there's a spring, and then you just slide this out. One thing to note is when you pull this out, you want to inspect down here where the bearing rides on the shaft. On either end, if the bearing's bad, it can wear a groove in the shaft, and what that'll do is it'll make the shaft rattle in the bearing, and it'll make a lot of noise and heat. So inspect to make sure your shaft is in good condition. Next step is to take the ends off. Some versions of this don't have screws. You can see this one, they may have a balancing screw. This one looks like it has 2 balancing screws here, one in the end, but then it also has 2 screws in this end down inside next to the bearing. So inspect that and make sure if you have the screws you remove them. Next we're going to take the ends off, and like I showed, this one has screws on the end, so we're just going to get a Phillips screwdriver. Pull those screws out. That's on the pulley end, and then this just pulls off, friction free. This end, I just take my flathead screwdriver, and you don't want to hit it too much because you can break this slip. So I just push it out, and sometimes you have to wiggle a little at a time. Same thing, friction fit. The brush strips, the best practice is to change these one at a time, because the brush roll, sometimes the integrity of the brush roll, it just has these 2 little supports inside. Just things go better when you do one at a time. So get it started and pull out your brush strip, and then you get in your new brush strip. Now for my purposes, I'm just going to put in the old brush strip, but if you look at the difference, see how this one now has a curve from being curved, this one doesn't. When you put in your new brush strip, you want to get it started, and then you want to twist it so that the curve of the brush, the twist of the brush, matches the twist of the groove of the brush roll. If you're really struggling to get this in, you can get a little soap, a little WD-40, something to lubricate that. I'd recommend something that's going to evaporate and not leave any residue. So to put my old brush in, I just put it in, make sure the twist is there, and I just push down. And as I'm pushing down, I'm watching the track of the brush strip with this metal piece. I don't want it to slice through the edge of the brush strip. And then on the end, you want to make sure that your end here is all the way seated. If you're having trouble seating the end, make sure that the lip of the brush strip isn't catching up, because there is, you need that metal bar to fit directly into your brush strip. Otherwise, your end cap won't sit flush. So if you look at this one here, there's just a slight, the metal slightly protrudes past the brush strip, and that's okay. We're going to go ahead and reassemble this brush roll, and then I'll show you what's different about the clutch. It has a little bit different set of things to think about. So when you're looking at your brush roll here, kind of lay things out, your bearings. If your bearings are grindy, a lot of times this black cap might be missing. Sometimes this piece gets melted. 95% of your bearing problems will happen at the non-belt end. This is where the suction's the lowest, and this is where debris seems to accumulate. So you can either replace this as an assembly, or you can just change the bearings. This also has bearings in it. Same thing, just make sure they're the same number. You don't have to replace them as a set, but if you are replacing one bearing, it's not a bad idea to do both. And actually, there's just so many variations of these. This one has a little washer on the end. It was sitting on the bearing there, so just watch for little parts when you're taking these apart. Next, I'm going to show you how to take the bearing out. Now, I'm usually using my bench vise. I'll open up the vise just enough so that I can set this on here. Again, I don't want to hammer too hard on these little ends because they can break off. So I'm going to try it here with a couple pieces of wood. So I'm going to put the wood over as much of the plastic as I can while leaving the bearing open. And then I'm sure you can use a punch, or really nut drivers don't work. I just find a flathead screwdriver of the proper thickness will catch that bearing enough, and then you can just tap it out. Kind of wiggle it off your brush roll there, and then get your new bearing. There's no thrust washer or anything, it's just the bearing sitting in there. And then just make sure you tap your bearing in. Goes in nice and easy and smooth, and you're good to go. I just want to mention real quick these balancing screws. I'm not really covering it in the video, and because I don't typically see this many, but I did make a mark on both ends. Both ends have balancing screws. So get yourself a little marker and put a little mark so that when you put this back together, you can make sure that the balancing screws are in the same spot that they were when you started. All right, I like to put my end on first, making sure the brushes are seated properly. Just tap it on your bench there. Look at it, make sure it's level and tight. Next, I put the middle back in. Usually, if you look here, it'll hit. So kind of put your eye down there and line it up, or just wiggle it in. So that comes up through. And looks like that. Everything looks nice and neat. At this point, I set it on its back end so that I know that it's pushed all the way up. Next, we want to put our pulley end on. So we want to put that on, and then we will need to tighten our screws down. That should slide on nice and easy. It should make, you know, everything should look nice and neat. If at any point in this process something's fighting you, the brush strips are hard to put on, something's not going together, it most likely means something's crooked. So just stop and try to start over and make sure everything's lined up. So you can just hand tighten these. They don't put any Loctite on them. They don't need a ton of torque. In fact, too much torque could crank this out of balance as well. So just hand tighten those. Next, we'll put on our surprise washer we weren't expecting. Got our spacer spring, our end cap. One thing about the end cap, because of that spring, is you have to maintain down pressure so that the hole is exposed on the end of the shaft. And then either use your thumbnail or a flathead screwdriver to push it through and make sure that the hole is exposed on the other side. Sometimes it'll really fight you getting that cotter spring in. Just make sure that the hole is not blocked by the end cap. Next thing, I'll put my rubber end caps on, and then again putting it on the bench and giving it a spin. You know, it feels well balanced. I don't hear any rubbing. It's not super wobbly, so I think we're good to go. So it really doesn't matter on the belt type, obviously making sure you get the right part, the right brush roll, the right belt. But what is different is the clutched versions. So what I'm going to talk about here is just for the clutched, either flat belt or poly groove belt. A couple things you can notice, this end's different. The number one thing, you know, we've done our test, we do our spin test, it feels good. What does change is we need to check our clutch. There is a clutch pad in here that can wear out. There's some spacer washers. Again, hair doesn't get too bad on this end. If you have damage from hair, it's usually in the non-belt end. The first thing I do anytime I work on one of these is I engage the clutch. The way you do that is you just, the feet of the brush roll go up into the housing. That lump goes into a side of the housing. This is your bottom plate side. So remember, the feet always go opposite the pinhole. But you know, when we engage our clutch, the bar is pulling the clutch about 90 degrees. So I engage the clutch about 90 degrees, and you can see how this metal plate slides against the plastics plate. It just pushes the pulley down. Now it's sitting tight against that rubber pad. And I spin it. So can I spin this? Yes. The question is how hard is it to spin? Because there is a balance between too hard and then you can't engage the clutch properly, or it's pretty easy to spin. So again, I don't know specific measurements, but you know, I just kind of, yes, if I really grip this, I can make it spin. But I think about the forces that are actually on the floor as this is working and what is like usual. And I would say a medium to a higher medium amount of force. And you can see it's not breaking away from that clutch pad. So this one I would say is good. A lot of times after 5-10 years, things settle, that clutch pad wears out, and this starts to rub. Then it makes heat. Then you fry your clutch pad. So I'm going to show you all that here right now. So to take this apart, I disengage the clutch. Same type of cotter pin. And again, you notice this is habit from years of working on these. Anytime, I always put a little force on the end to always make sure it's not, if we have an upward force pinching the cotter pin in, it's going to be hard to remove. So I always make a little down force so that I know that this is going to slide out really easily. Now this is where you really got to watch your order. So notice there's a spring, everything wants to shoot off. So I'm still holding the end, gripping that pulley. So now I can take my end cap, I can take my spacer washers, got my plastic end, my metal end, my pulley. These have bearings that can go bad but don't typically go bad. Usually you get a little bit of hair stuck under here. And now we're to our clutch pad. The back end of this brush roll is the same as the non-clutched. Also, there's really not typically a spot for screws, but some revisions, if I remember correctly, have had screws. So we'll take this clutch pad out if it can come out. Some revisions you can take the clutch pad out, some of them you can't. One thing to look when you're inspecting this clutch pad is it really shiny? Does it look like a sheen or like a slick of oil on water? If you see that rainbow effect or it's very shiny, you know it's gotten hot. It's also going to feel very hard, and it's not going to grip against this metal surface, and it's going to slip. So if this doesn't look nice and clean, then just replace it. Doing a little investigation, it looks like this clutch pad is glued. So I can kind of pull on it, you see, but it's stuck. So I am going to have to replace this whole thing. So to get it out, you pull the end off. You can either grab this in a vise or you can take your flathead screwdriver. Just be careful not to damage the end caps. You can kind of get in there and then wedge it out, flip it over, and just, work it out to get the whole thing out. I don't want to ruin this brush roll because it's new, but you can get up here and rip this out. Sometimes it'll leave little chunks of rubber. You want to make sure you clean it up real good. And then this is what we're going to replace it with. It's held in with 3 tabs, and then you can see there's 3 little divots. You got to make sure it's lined up when you're putting it in, that the tabs and the pins line up. So once you replace that, say we put our new one on, push it on real nice, or we can just change this. We can pull this pad off to get the bearing out. The bearing will go out the same way I showed you before, using the wood or vise and just tapping it out. Then we're ready to put it back together. Same thing as before. I always like to start with having this end on. Then I'll put this back on, making sure everything's seated nice and tight. This particular revision doesn't have screws. I don't have the best memory, but there may be screws under there too. So if it's really fighting you, get under this pad. Obviously the screw version is not going to have a glued pad. Like I say, they went through many revisions on these over the years. So the next in your order is your spring, then your clutch metal side down. Now here's where I set it up on the end and I hold it down here because it'll shoot off of there. So hold that down tight. Metal piece. The part that looks like it's going to rub against something needs to go up towards the plastic piece it's going to rub on. Notice it's keyed here on the end. That's for your next part, the plastic piece. And the feet always go opposite the pin. So now I've set my feet here. If my pin is down here with the feet, you can see that's wrong. That pin needs to be 90 or 180 degrees. And I should be then the disengaged. That way I have enough space there. Next I put on my spacer washers. Always start with the default. Sometimes if it was loose before and you change the pad, it may be fine. But it's good. We also sell a washer kit that they have those washers as well as some nice instructions. And then I'm holding this down. I'm going to put the pin on and then immediately I'm checking. Now, if I can't get it low enough that the hole for the pin is is up here, I did something wrong. It means my brush strip, something's not seated properly. I should be able to pull it down and have it be below. And then I have to, release it up. Doing it backwards, and I just wiggle it. Wiggling is your friend. And then just kind of move it around so you get that pin through the other side, and then it'll clip right on. Immediately what I'm going to do then is I'm going to engage the clutch. Can I engage the clutch? In this case I could. Tap the ends just to get everything seated. I'm going to spin it. It's spinning pretty good. And then I'm going to go back to how hard is it to turn this. So I'm re-engaging this. It's engaged and it's good. Can I spin it? Yes. The other side of the coin is, so let's say it was easy to spin, you add those washers. If you add too many washers, the thing that happens is you won't be able to engage the brush roll. So, I mean, is it tight when I pull this over? Yes. But is it so tight I have to struggle? No. If it's so tight I have to struggle, then it may mean I need to change my clutch pad because I have too many washers and it's not gripping against there. It shouldn't slide too easy. What will happen is if I have too many washers, when you go to pull that bar, you have that, pretend we're in the machine here, brush roll's in the machine. I'll put it your way. So you have the brush roll in the machine, the belt's going back on the motor, and you're going to hook in your bar. Well, the problem is when you reach around the other end and you pull on that tab to put it into the brush setting, it's going to pull it like this. It's going to pull it not enough. So this right here is not going to fully engage the brush, and as the machine works, it can slide back out and disengage the brush. Or if it's only partially engaged, it will loosely touch the clutch plate and burn the clutch. So a good test is when you put this in the machine, engage the brush. Does it engage? Yes. And then look back on the back side of that knob. Just look back at that and make sure that it's all the way into the carpet setting. It's not like 3/4 or 80% of the way in. It's completely pulled back. If still not working, I mean, you can have problems with the bar and the mechanism, but that's for another video. Don't try to bend the bar because once they get bent, it's really hard to get them fixed again. It's better to just replace it. So that's that. So I hope this has been helpful in how to maintain your brush roll for your car vacuums. Again, in the description, I'll put the models they fit. There's many. One more thing I want to touch on is the brush strips. They have these are the red and gold. They have some that are black and gold. They have some that are blue and gold. They all are, the difference is the brush strip length. So you can get away at putting these on the black and gold model if your model's in the list below, or you can get away with putting it on the blue and gold model. The worst thing I've seen is the brush rolls. The brush strips will be a little too long and they'll rub against the housing. But once they wear in, you're fine, in my opinion. There are other color brush strips that are different lengths. So if your model's not on the list, you may need a different item number. So any questions, you can always email or call Classic Vacuum. Thank you for watching my video. My name's Aaron from Classic Vacuum. We have locations in North Canton and Worcester, Ohio. If you have any questions, just let us know and we'll help you any way we can. Thank you.